guys, my name is Shanice and today I have 10 adult and YA fantasy and sci-fi book recommendations for you. I'm just gonna straight on say it, I'm cheating a little bit because I do have 10 series on this list, and then I also have 3 more sort of honorable mentions that might not have been my absolute favorite, but I would still really recommend you to read them because they might just be your favorites. So it's 13 in total, but 10 just sounds more catchy and stuff. So I'm sorry for clickbaiting you, I guess, but yeah, let's just get started. So I do want to start this by saying that although I do really like fantasy, there's so much out there that I still have not read. So if your favorite is not on this list, please comment it down below so other people can check it out, so I can check it out. There's definitely so much on my want to read list. My TBR is giant, and I also do want to focus more on reading more fantasy books by POC. I do have some on my list already, but I noticed that I read a lot more books by POC that are more like contemporary or romances, but I definitely want to focus more on fantasy. So this list is pretty wide, just putting it out there. These are just the books that I've read so far and would recommend you guys. So let's get started. So the first series that I have here is the A Chorus of Dragons series by Jen Lyons. I think this will be 5 books in total. These are the first 3 that have been released so far. My copies are not matching, I know. I've read the first 2. I've read The Ruin of Kings and The Name of All Things, as you probably can see by the spines, and I've yet to read the third one, A Memory of Souls, and the fourth one I think will be releasing May 2021, so pretty soon. Let me just hold up the first one. So if you are a follower of mine already, then you've probably heard me talk about this series before. It did make it on my best books of 2020 list. It's just a great series. It is a bit of a complicated adult epic fantasy series, and we follow, in the first book we follow Kieran, and basically he tells part of his life story a couple of years later, and then alternating chapters there's also this kind of monster person that tells his life story from different perspectives a couple of years earlier. So we have a very unique style of telling this story, and Kieran just goes through a lot. He's involved in this prophecy, but it's not really a good prophecy. It's kind of predicting the end of the world as we know it. He gets involved with gods and dragons, with the royal family who claim that he is a bastard of their family. So yeah, there's a lot going on. And then we also have these kind of footnotes here as well, because there's another person that is reading the story and kind of reflecting on it and saying whether some things might not be true. So it can be a bit complicated, but just take your time reading it, and if you don't understand something right away, big chances are it will come back later and you'll be like, oh my god, that's why. There's a lot of plot twists, there's lots of epic battle scenes, betrayal. It's really good. And I've heard there's like a polyamorous relationship in the third book, so you know, if you're into that, look out for that. Then next up, I have a series that I've only read the first novella of, and I don't own it yet, but I do want to buy it soon. And it's the Binti series. These are adult sci-fi novellas. I do believe they are adult, not young adult. Like I said, I've only read the first one, and I do believe that if you read all of the novellas back to back, it's just like a regular novel, and it can also read that way. So I'm very excited to read more of this. I think the author did a great job of, in these really small amount of pages that she got, just telling this whole epic sci-fi story about this girl called Binti. She's from Earth, and it seems like she's of like some kind of African descent, and she is kind of one of the first people that go secretly, she's only 16, that can go to this like really prestigious university somewhere in the universe. So she leaves secretly, she meets all different kinds of aliens. There's a lot of prejudice too, because she looks and smells very differently than other people, and then there's a lot of really epic alien kind of things happening. I'm not going to tell you too much because it is such a short story, but I would really recommend you to read it. Don't pick up the audiobook, I think, because I've seen reviews of people saying on Goodreads they were confused, they didn't get it, they were listening to the audiobook. I read the physical copy, or well, my ebook version, and it was fine. I didn't have any trouble with it. And yeah, I really like the ending, and I'm very excited to read more. So yeah, I would really recommend this as a sci-fi book. Next up, I'm just grabbing my copy of The Way of Kings. I have the other books right here. I would just recommend you the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, of course. The first book is The Way of Kings. These are big, chunky books. They're amazing, but yeah, like I said, they are big books. I still have to read the last installment that was released November 2020, Rhythm of War. It's right there. I've read The Way of Kings twice. I've also read Words of Radiance twice, and I've read Oathbringer once, and I still cannot give you a synopsis of this series. I would would just highly recommend you to read it. The thing is that even though they're big and there's a lot of things happening and it's kind of hard to summarize, I don't think they're really that intimidating or that hard to get through. They're not really like, when I think of like classic, epic, high fantasy, I do think of something that's a bit more complicated to read and difficult to read. But because Brandon Sanderson writes quite simple in a way, it's really easy to fly through his books actually, even though there are a lot of characters and there's a lot of things happening, and you also have to kind of sort of pay attention as you go along. Slowly more things about the world and its history are revealed, and when the reveal comes, it's just, for me anyway, still shocking. I'm never really good at predicting what he's going to do. I'm just here for the ride, and it's really great. So yeah, although I really struggle with giving synopsis, I'm sure you've already heard of this. You can read the synopsis on Goodreads. Even the synopsis on the back does not even cover half of the book. Like, it doesn't even come close to covering all of the things that are happening in these books. So I'm not even gonna try, but I would just recommend you to read it if you haven't already. Next up, I have another adult sci-fi recommendation for you, although some people categorize this as more like sci-fi fantasy-ish. It's the Red Rising Saga by Pierce Brown. So I do have the Red Rising Trilogy here. You should read that first. But then you can move on to the extra installments, and they are so much better, I think, in my opinion anyway. So yeah, this is already really good, right? But then I read Iron Gold, which is the 4th book in the saga, and it's like 10 years after the events of Red Rising. Amazing. I love all of the new characters and the way the story is going now. It's really interesting. And then obviously we have the next book, but I haven't read that yet. It's Dark Age by Pierce Brown as well. So yeah, I've read up to book 4 in the saga, even though there are 5 so far, and the 6th book should be releasing, I think, this year, but I couldn't find any info on it yet, like no title or cover page or whatever, so it might be delayed. I have no idea. So far, I would just highly recommend this. This one is now my favorite in the whole saga. It's just great, and I heard that Dark Age will be even more heartbreaking. So yeah, just they will take you for a ride. You will fear for every single character, and you will get so attached to them and hate them. Like some of them you will just hate but still love. He just makes really complex characters, in my opinion. No one is really good or bad. There's a lot of like moral grayness and stuff in here, or gray morality. I don't know what the words are, but you know what I mean. And it's a lot about politics too, and about sci-fi. And yeah, we have this world where the first book, the very first book, it's divided in colors, and reds are the lowest of the lowest. They slave away in the mines, and they are kind of fed this lie that they are working to bring humanity to Mars and to finally help humanity. And then it turns out that humanity has been on Mars for thousands of years already, super advanced, they are living the best life, and the golds are at the top of the chain. And we follow Darrow, who is a rat, as he goes through kind of something traumatic and the events that follow from that. I don't want to give too much away because I feel like you should definitely discover that for yourself as you read them, but it's amazing. It's one of my favorite series. Then back to some fantasy is a trilogy that I read last year, so very recently. It's the Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in her whole Elderling world, and yeah, so we have Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin, and Assassin's Quest, and these are the first 3 books in the trilogy, but I do believe that after another trilogy we will revisit some of the characters in here in another trilogy. So yeah, she has a lot of books, and I'm not entirely familiar with the universe yet, but I would highly recommend these. I have such conflicted feelings about this book, I have got to say, about these books. I think I give the first one, I don't know, I either gave both of these 4 stars or 5 stars, and the last one I for sure gave 5 stars, and it was just so amazing. This is also a bit different because almost always in fantasy books we have multiple points of views and like a bigger cast of characters, but this one we just solely see from the viewpoint of Fitz. And what I think that Robin Hobb does really well, like her writing is really beautiful, it's easy to get through, it's beautifully descriptive but not too flowery or anything, and she just is so great at creating all of these different characters and making them feel so real. They all have their flaws and their own very distinct personalities, and Fitz is the same. And another thing that's really great about this is that you don't always know what's happening. You only know what Fitz knows is happening, and Fitz has, you know, his own view on the world that sometimes isn't completely right. So at least I was completely taken by surprise whenever something happened that Fitz wasn't aware of. There was like a plot twist. I totally didn't see it coming because I completely believed whatever Fitz thought was the truth. We also deal with magic in this one, but not until the last one do we get to know more about the magic, I think, and more about the world. And the first one is it's really just Fitz's life story as he grows up. He is a royal bastard of the family, and when he is around 10 years old, the king tells him to become the royal assassin because he's a bastard. He cannot really be anywhere, you know, close in the succession line because then all of the other princes will view him as a threat, but he can still work for the royal family in that way. And there's also 2 magic systems in this one. We have the wit and the skill. And the skill is something that's really a part of the royal family. It's still a bit confusing to me as to what it is, not gonna lie, but it's kind of like mind magic in a way. And then you have the wit, which allows you to bond with animals, but that's very feared and reviled in this world, but Fitz has both. I'm not gonna tell you anything else. There's so much more happening. The last one is definitely my favorite, so even if they can be really slow at times, they're so worth it at the end. Everything is worth it at the end. This one took me 2 months to read. I read it on audio, actually listened to the audiobook, which the audiobooks are really great. The narrator is a bit slow again. I listen to it on 2 times speed, and sometimes I wish he would just hurry up, but he does really nice voice acting. He puts a lot of emotion and stuff in it, and he does different distinct voices for everyone, so that was really great. So I would also really recommend the audiobooks for these ones. But yeah, the last one just was such a big payoff for all the wait and everything we had to go through in the first half of this book too. It's terribly sad, heartbreaking. Fitz doesn't have an easy life, but it's great, it's amazing. And these covers are so pretty too. Then for some more sci-fi, one of my favorite books series of all time is the Wayfarers series. Is it Wayfarers? Oh my gosh, now I suddenly don't know. So we have the first book, which is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I've read that one twice, tapped it, love it. It's still my favorite, I think, in this series, but I love the other ones so much too, so I give this one 5 stars. Then we have A Close and Common Orbit. They can be read as standalones, but I would recommend you to read them in order because in this one we follow a couple of side characters that we meet in the first book, and then in this one again you follow some characters that you've gotten to know in the first book. Even though you didn't get to know them really well, there's also a lot more world building if you just follow through with the book. So yeah, I would highly recommend you to do that. So we have A Close and Common Orbit, which is also my fave. I cried a little bit when I read this one. It was sad but really good. And then we have Record of a Spaceborne Few, which was a bit too much focused on daily lives for me, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but still really enjoyed it. So the thing with these ones is that there's not like a lot of action or a big exciting plot. It's really just this huge universe, right? And all of these different aliens and humans mixed together, and just learn more about the history, how humans got to be there, what different aliens there are. There are kind of hierarchy in the universe too. Humans are definitely not on top, which I really enjoy actually, that there are aliens and they are actually just smarter and stronger than humans are. I just find it a very interesting concept. In the first one, we follow a crew as they go on a kind of long haul. So they have to go for a year, do a kind of job. And so they are together on the ship for a year. And it's a mix of aliens and humans. And it's their dynamics, their relationships, learning more about each other. And it's just really human and heartfelt. And her books always give me that feeling of what it means to be human and to have connections, even though half of the characters aren't human. And then in the second book, we follow a kind of AI, artificial intelligence, as she goes into this kind of synthetic body and wants to live as a sort of human with a genetically engineered human who has a very traumatic past. And in the last one, we just follow humans as they live together. And this one was also sad. Like, they're sad, but really good, and just also really heartwarming as well. So yeah, they're a bit more mundane in a way, but really great. Moving on to some YA, I have The Last Magician and the Devil's Thief. I'm not sure what the name of the series is, so I'm just gonna call it The Last Magician series. But this is by Lisa Maxwell. These are the only 2 books that have been released so far. The third one was set to release in 2020, but it's been being pushed back constantly, so I'm not really sure when it will be releasing. But yeah, these are the first 2 so far. So yeah, The Last Magician and Devil's Thief. This one, it's just so much fun. It's, like I said, a YA series, and we follow Asta. She's the main character. She lives in kind of our modern day world, but she can time travel, and she's being raised by this professor, and he has multiple people with these kind of special talents, and he has a job for Asta. He sends her back to early 1900s, like 1912 or something, New York, where she has to prevent the magician from betraying his crew, and she has to steal these objects from him. So she goes back in time, and there's so much happening. Literally every chapter feels like a plot twist. I loved it. I also really like the setting of early 1900s New York. It's kind of like the roaring 20s almost, and I just really like that setting. It's 1912 or 1919. I don't know what exactly the time is, but just the aesthetic and the vibe of it is also really great. It has a sort of romance going on, but like a really subplot, but I really love romance anyway. But even if you don't enjoy romance, I think you will still enjoy this because it's not like a big part of it. But one thing I love is that the magician knows that Asta is there to double cross him, and he wants to double cross her, which she also knows. But still, they can't help but be attracted to each other. I don't know, it's just great. They are like kind of drawn to each other, pushing each other away. And then the end, it was just great. This one was also good, but it definitely felt a bit more like a middle book to me. So this one was 5 stars for me, and this one was like 4 stars, but still very good. And also these covers. Next up is a book that I read very recently as an ARC. It hasn't released yet. I don't have a physical copy of it. I read it as an e-ARC, but it's Hall of Smoke by H.M. Long. This one just was fantastic. It is a standalone, but the author said that there will be another book set in this world. It's kind of like standalones, but they are set in the same world, you know? Anyway, this is the first book, and it's great. It's kind of inspired by Norse mythology, and we follow a warrior priestess, Hessa. She is kind of part of this cult, I guess, or just this religion. They all worship Eang. I'm probably gonna mispronounce a lot of names, I'm sorry. She is the warrior goddess that they all worship, so they learn to fight really well, but they also have this fire in them, and when they scream, they can kind of kill their enemies. It's really cool. At the beginning of the book, Hessa did something for which she was at least temporarily banished from the Eang clan. Basically, her whole family and all of the priestesses get murdered, and it's kind of this mystery as to why this happened. Hessa gets captured. Her goddess actually told her to kill this man, and that's the one thing she didn't do. And she doesn't know why she has to kill him. All of the gods are there. There's this bigger game going on, and Hessa's trying to figure it all out. And I really enjoy that this is not just inspired by mythology and some mentions of the gods. The gods really play active roles in the story, and we meet a lot of them, a lot of different gods and goddesses, and then even more of them. And they're in different hierarchies, and it's just really great. I don't want to tell you too much because the biggest part of this for me was finding out what the heck was going on, because we really grow with Hessa in the beginning. She's completely devoted to her one goddess and doesn't really know anything about the world, and as we go along she starts to kind of question her faith. Different gods and stuff keep telling her that, not everything that she believed to be true might actually be true. There's some betrayals going on. It's great, and the writing style was really nice. It's like descriptive, and you can really picture everything without becoming too flowery, so I really enjoyed that. Another YA fantasy that, again, I've only read the first book of because the second book is yet to release as far as I'm aware, is Fireborne by Rosaria Munda. The light is not great, I'm sorry. Anyway, this is a YA political fantasy. It does have dragons, but I mean, I guess the cover and the title can lead you to think that there will be more dragons than there actually are. The dragons are there, but they're not really the main focus. The main focus is really these politics. For me, an extra bonus was that I was just taking a course on European legal history, and this book is very much inspired by the Roman times. So a lot of the terms that I was learning about are actually in here. And it's really interesting because we follow these two people. One of them used to belong to the ruling people of the world, the aristocrats, who were pretty awful, and they've been overthrown by the new kind of republic, the new revolutionaries, and that's the other character that we follow. She belongs to them. They're both dragon riders who are still, they used to be in the elite and really feared. They are still the elite, but they're trying to make them more for the people, I guess. And it's just really great because it deals a lot with political choices and how it's really hard to make a choice that will benefit everyone and no one will suffer. And it's really impossible to be black and white, good or bad. Everything is a bit more gray, as I struggle with that, and it's also their kind of sort of love story too. It was really enjoyable, and I'm very excited to read the second book, although I think I need to reread this because there's a lot I've forgotten, because it's been over a year since I read this, I think. And then the last book on my top 10 list is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is, again, it's a standalone, but Samantha Shannon has said on Twitter that she is writing more books in this world. So I'm not sure if it's going to be like a series, because you can read this in its entirety as a story of its own, but there's probably going to be more set in this world, which I think is fantastic because she built a huge, amazing fantasy world, and I definitely feel like she could explore it way more in different stories. But this one is a sapphic story too, so that's great. Some romance going on between two people. I'm not gonna say who, just in case you consider it a spoiler. But we follow, what's her name again? It's something with an E. Eats. I'm sorry, I'm probably pronouncing everything very Dutch. She's a lady in waiting to the queen, but she's also secretly a mage. And she was sent there by the Priory of the Orange Tree, which is just the most amazing thing ever, to keep watch of Sabran, who is the queen. And there's also this thing going on with the royal family that, first of all, they all look the same, which is creepy AF. So it doesn't matter what man comes to her, all the women look like the first original queen. They have like black hair, green eyes, stuff like that. So Iyad is supposed to keep Sabran safe because Sabran must continue the royal family, because then they will be protected against these evil dragons. And then we follow I think 4 perspectives in total, I'm not really sure. We follow the west, which is Sabran and Iyad, but then we also follow the east, where they actually worship the dragons and work together with them, but they're different from the dragons in the west. And it's so interesting, and then these two worlds kind of collide, and there's quite a lot of dragons in this one too. I'm thinking I want to reread this, especially if there are more books set in this world, because it's just amazing. It's 5 stars for me, and even though it might be intimidating because again it's a big fantasy book, I pretty much flew through this. I read this in a couple of days because the writing style is pretty accessible, and because it's limited perspectives, it wasn't too hard for me to keep up with who everyone was. It just wraps up so nicely in one book, which is kind of great. But yeah, I would really recommend you to read this. Moving on to some honorable mentions. The first one is Kingdom of Souls by Rena Barron. This is a YA series. I've only read the first one. I'm not sure how many books are gonna be in here. This was like 4.5 stars for me, which is why it's not like on my all-time favorite best recommendations, but still I would really recommend you to check this out. This is African inspired, and it's really interesting because this girl comes from a very powerful family. They have a lot of magic, but she doesn't have any, and she's desperate to get it. Eventually does some terrible things that you're not supposed to get at least some power for herself. And then there's a lot of like plot twists. She finds out that there's some evil things going on. Children are disappearing off the streets, and she wants to find out who did it. And when you find out who did it, I at least was like, no. So yeah, it's really interesting. There's some like an underlying love story again going on, but not too much if you're not into that. So yeah, I would really recommend this. Another series that I would recommend is the Blackthorn Grim series by Juliette Marie. I'm sorry. So the first one is Dreamer's Pool, and the second one is Tower of Thorns. These are again like novels in a series, but they're not really like one plot line. Everyone like is a story in itself. I've read this a couple of years ago already, but the covers are just so pretty. There is a third book that I don't own and haven't read yet, but I do really want to. But I've read these two, and these reads more like fairy tales. They're very whimsical in a way, so they're not like your typical epic fantasy or something. They're more, yeah, like I said, like a fairy tale. So we have Blackthorn. Let me see again what it's about because it's been a while. Oh yeah, right. Blackthorn, she's now very bitter because she had a really nice life with her husband and her child. And then I think it was like the kingdom, they murdered them. They burned them alive. It was really traumatizing for them. And she has been wrongfully imprisoned for a very long time. And it's kind of like fairy man creature. He sets her free, but in return, she has to make a deal with him. She needs to set aside her need for vengeance against the man who destroyed her whole family. And she now has to help people. For 7 years, she has to assist anyone who asks her for help. And another former prison mate, someone who she was in prison with, is Grim. He will just be there to assist her, and there is some hints of them falling in love. And I love Grim. He's just such a big cutie and Blackthorn is such a grumpy woman, you know. And so every book has a different story where they have to help the people there. And this one, I just feel like you should find out what the stories are for themselves, because they read very much like fairy tales. They're very magical too. There's a lot of magic in this. Those are the characters that we're following basically, and every book they are helping someone else. At least that's what I think for the first 2 books anyway. I just realized that my last honorable mention is actually not really YA, it's more middle grade. It's Keeper of the Lost Cities, but I'm just gonna put it on here anyway. If you're in the mood for middle grade and a more light-hearted fantasy, then I would really recommend you this series. As you can see, I have the first 4 books and I've read the first 3 so far, and they're really enjoyable. They're about this 12-year-old girl called Sophie. She lives in the human world. She's really smart. She can also hear people's thoughts. She struggles with that because her family is very normal and she doesn't understand what's wrong with her, until one day at the very beginning of this book, there's this boy called Fitz who appears before her and tells her that she's actually an elf and she belongs in their world, and they've been looking for her for years. And he whisks her away to the elf world, where she goes to attend a magical school, and she finds out more about her past, because it seems like that she has been created by this secret group for a certain purpose. She has a lot of special talents. She's very much like the you know, the chosen one, but it's fun. Yeah, it's just a really fun series and I would recommend you to check it out. All right, that's it. Those are my 10/13 fantasy and sci-fi book recommendations for you guys. Let me know if you've read any of these and if you've enjoyed them, or if you have any recommendations for me. Feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to check out the links to all of my social media and stuff in my description box down below. And thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time, hopefully soon. Bye bye.